Hey everyone, my name is Jane Ruby and I am president of the League of Women Voters of Chicago. Thank you to everyone who is tuning in on this Saturday afternoon, just a few short days before Election Day. We really appreciate it, and thank you to both of our candidates for 30th Ward Alderman for being here. Actually, Alderperson as of last week when they passed that. Before we get started, just a quick blurb about our two kind of organizations that are co-sponsoring this. First, we have the Voters Engagement Coalition, which functions around three simple yet powerful tenets: registration, education, and mobilization. Their mission is to empower communities to create change and use voting to transform communities. Our missions are in line with that as well with League of Women Voters. So we are a nonpartisan grassroots organization working to protect and expand voting rights and to ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. We empower voters and defend democracy through advocacy and education. Through this forum, we hope we all become better informed about the issues facing our communities and become better acquainted with the candidates running for office. This is our last candidates forum of the municipal election cycle. We have kind of tried to touch as many parts of the different city, different neighborhoods in the city with our candidate forums. We've almost done 20 on the Aldermanic side, including some duplicates for the runoff. It would have been more, but we require at least two candidates to participate. And we did have some reluctant candidates, so we were not able to hit all of the wards that we wanted to cover. We've also done a bunch of mayoral forums, as the ones that, the one that we are most proud of is our collaboration with ABC 7. So we did one for the February election and also the April runoff. We did try to do a mayoral forum focusing on the environment. We couldn't get that done, but a questionnaire was sent to both mayoral candidates, and it was developed with almost 30 environmental organizations. So stay tuned for that to be published this weekend in anticipation of voting on Tuesday and Election Day. And with that, I will hand it over to Anana, who will be our moderator for this event. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming to the 30th Ward Runoff Aldermanic Forum. I am pleased to introduce our candidates, Jessica Gutierrez and Ruth Cruz. So we will be spotlighting them in order of alphabetically.
Okay.
All right, and before we begin, we would like to go over some ground rules for today's forum. First, we will be accepting audience questions. So if you have a question, please direct it toward the person named Audience Questions through means of the private chat. Additionally, regarding question response times, they will be indicated before each question. Candidates will be allowed to finish a sentence once started, but I will enforce a strict time limit by using the mute feature. If a candidate does not use all the time allotted for a response, the unused time cannot be applied to any other question. Moreover, all candidates will be muted until we ask them to unmute before every question. To keep track of times, paddles will be held up by our timekeeper, also spotlighted, to alert the candidates as to when they have 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and 0 seconds remaining for their response. And with all that, we will begin with 90-second opening statements from both candidates. Candidates are asked to include why they want to be an alderman and what their qualifications are. We will begin in alphabetical order, starting with candidate Cruz. You have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you. Thank you for putting this together to League of Women Voters and allowing us, we're 3 days away from election. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ruth Cruz. I'm running to be the new Alderwoman of the 30th Ward. And a little bit about myself is I am a mother, I'm a wife, and I'm a community volunteer. I came to Chicago at the age of 7 as a child immigrant. I have built my life on my own. I have been, build my life, my education, my family, my success around hard work that I have done, making sure that I went on to completed my master's degree in management, have worked in higher education for over 16 years. And I have been in management for over 10 years. Have been want to give back to the community, got involved in being a volunteer. I'm also part of the local school council for Foreman High School and part of the Avondale Restorative Justice Community Court. And why I'm running is first and foremost, I'm a mother, like as I mentioned. I'm raising my family in a community that I love. And I want to make sure that our children grow up in a safe and have a safe environment and have a great education and opportunities. But I want to build an independent and progressive ward office that is transparent, that is inclusive, that it's accountable, and that puts people first, that our work is for the community and not any other type of interest, but rather for the community. And while I'm ready, again, I've known my community, have been involved in the community for quite some time. I'm ready to use my managerial skills into this role and make sure that we hold people accountable, that we create good routines, but then also that we are consistent. And I'm proud to say that I have been endorsed by a lot of great unions, but also a lot of elected officials in the.
All right, thank you, candidate. Unfortunately, your time has elapsed and we will be enforcing the time limit strictly. So please try and keep your questions short. All right, now we will be moving on to candidate Gutierrez.
Hi, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters for having this and organizing this. I'm a mother, a teacher, a community organizer, and a lifelong Chicagoan running to represent the 30th Ward. 4 years ago, I took on the old guard machine here in the 30th. We forced him into a runoff, which hadn't been done in 16 years, and we almost did it. What we did do was build hope in our community to bring transparent and responsive good government to the 30th Ward. On February 28th, we won 22 of the 26 precincts. We had a plurality of the vote across the ward. Why? Because our messaging always stayed the same. It was consistent, and we want to unify our ward. What we've seen in the past 4 years is a rise in crime, closed businesses, lack of constituent services, and disinvestment in our public education and youth programming. We have a very unique opportunity to leave all of that behind and elect a full-time alderman who's going to be a proactive leader. In the past 4 years, I've helped to ensure that millions of state and city funding have come here, over $3 million during COVID. We ushered in after school programs, youth employment initiatives. Where there was a lack of constituent services, my staff and I said that we were present. We helped keep children fed, pay the rent, and over 7,000 30th Ward community members were able to receive their vaccines through our office. What we need right now is an experienced, bold voice to go to City Hall. And that's why I'm running, to bring that to the 30th Ward in a bold and fierce way.
All right, thank you, candidates. As a follow-up question, we would like each candidate to please share her work experience, including employers and time at each job over the past decade. We will start with candidate Gutierrez. You have 30 seconds to answer.
Sure. So for the past 9 months, I've been full-time on the campaign. And before that, I was a senior policy director for a mid-sized nonprofit, the Puerto Rican Cultural Center, where we ushered in 2 new direct service offices into the 30th Ward during COVID. Before that, I was a PhD and graduate student where I was a teacher, both in Louisiana as a public school teacher, and I taught abroad in Israel and Palestine, in Jerusalem, while I was doing a PhD fellowship out there too.
All right, thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz, you have 30 seconds.
As I mentioned, I have over 16 years of experience in higher education. Currently, the assistant director of admissions for Roosevelt University, and throughout my year, I have I'll be managing teams that go up to 20 to 25 members in each group. I have been developing and training leaders to become better. I have been able to manage budgets, train employees, but as well achieve goals. So for my things that I pride myself is the experience that I have, not only to have a plan, to implement a plan, readjust if needed, but at the end bring results. I've just this past spring enrollment, we exceeded enrollment for over 30%, and that's what I have been given always a responsibility to work with budgets that are very small, but at the end of the day, we bring the results to the table. And again, and this is by coaching.
All right. Once again, candidate, please ensure that when you're finishing up a sentence, to just keep it short so we can enforce our time limits and make sure that it is fair. But now we will be moving on to our next topic, which is going to be gun violence and public safety. Public safety and gun violence are among the top concerns in the ward and throughout Chicago. What realistically could you do as an alderperson and member of city council to reduce gun violence and improve public safety in the short term and in the long term? Candidates, you will have 60 seconds to answer this question, starting with candidate Cruz.
So when it comes to the short term, to answer your question, but at the end of the day, we have to address the root causes of crime. And the short perspective things is within the first month that I'm elected, I will be meeting with the police department in the 25th district, 16th district, and 17th district to do an assessment, block assessment, to be able to see what are the hotspot areas, what are the things that we need to implement, and how we monitor these areas. It said, let's look at the infrastructure of things that can, what can implement on different things. But then also on the long-term, treatment, not trauma, is something that we have to bring more youth programs as well. And with a treatment, not trauma, making sure that can this alleviate some of the responsibilities of our police officers to be able to bring that in, again, our youth programs as well.
All right, thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
We need to take a wide-angled view at public safety in Chicago. So in my office, I'm going to make sure that we have a senior staffer who's going to deal with making sure that we're working with the newly elected ECPS persons, and also bringing law enforcement together. There are many different forms of law enforcement within the 30th Ward. We have the Sheriff's Department, we have CPD, we have the Transportation Police, we have the state of Illinois. They are not speaking to each other because we have not had leadership in the 30th Ward for the past 2 decades that has made sure to bring them all together. Making sure that our office is an office of resources. And this is why our campaign has been endorsed by Sheriff Tom Dart. We support treatment, not trauma, but also making sure that we're protecting the social workers and the mental health professionals that are going to be confronting this conflict. We need to rethink how we look at public safety. We don't have a budget problem. We have an allocation problem. We can use this funding to look at the root causes, but at the same time, bolster our police force and stop wasting money and overtime and oversight and build trust in our communities.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question is regarding the police districts. The 30th Ward spans several police districts. How do you see yourself working with the newly elected councils of the 16th, 17th, and 25th police districts and their 3 police district commanders, as well as with the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability to achieve your goals? We will begin with candidate Gutierrez. You have 30 seconds to answer this question.
I think that, this is about accountability and accountability from our commanders in 16, 17, and 25, and making sure that our relationship isn't just one of friendship, right? We need to make sure that they're coming into the 30th Ward, that they're there for the constituents, and that they're telling us how we are supposed to be responding to these upticks in crime. What are we going to do? We're going to make sure that we're having meetings with them, that we're meeting with every commander, not only the commanders with CPD, but the state police and the Sheriff's Department and the Transportation Police, so that we have a holistic look at where all of the information is coming, because we don't have that right now.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz, you have 30 seconds.
So that one of the things is will be accountability, not only working with our police department, but also working with my office. And at the end of the day, we need to have a relationship because this is what the community is requiring for us, because we have to be servicing our community. We want to make sure their community feels safe. We want to make sure that we're working together as a team to be able to bring the police into the communities and build that relationship that is much needed as well. But again, holding my office and holding meetings to be able to bring these resources to the community.
Thank you, candidates. Now, our next question will address something you both touched on. Do you support the Treatment Not Trauma Ordinance? That is a crisis response program that dispatches mental health professionals and an EMT to mental health emergency calls instead of police officers. We will begin with candidate Cruz, and you will have 30 seconds to answer this question.
Absolutely. I support treatment not trauma. We want to make sure that not every 911 call requires a police officer. It requires a different type of help. And that's why we need to have our mental health specialists be able to respond to the call. And again, it will service two different purposes. One, get the help that is needed, but then also help our police officers to focus on other calls.
Candidate Gutierrez.
Yes, we definitely, our campaign supports treatment, not trauma. But when this goes through city council, I want to make sure that treatment, not trauma is going to be able to survive heavy scrutiny, and being able to do that, we need to answer some hard questions. One being, how are we going to make sure that social workers and mental health professionals are also being protected when they're going to some of these calls, which we don't know if they can turn in violent, right? Most social workers are women. They've been unseen, underpaid, and haven't received that support. So I want to make sure that they're getting paid what they should be getting paid, and that they have the protection when they're answering to some of these calls.
Thank you, candidate. Now we will be moving on to the related topic of mental health. The city of Chicago is in the midst of a mental health crisis. Young people have been traumatized by gun violence, while untreated citizens live on the street or are often locked up in Cook County Jail. How can the city establish more mental health facilities and services and make sure that they are placed where they are needed the most? You will have 60 seconds to answer this question, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
We need to ensure that we're working with our community-based organizations who are fighting at the front line for mental health in our communities. I think working with them, making sure that the alderman is having a relationship with all of the community-based organizations that offer this type of help is going to be the first step. Helping them receive the funding, helping them in the grant writing, helping them get it, and then allocating it into the correct areas in our ward. Also, making sure that in our budget, right, when it gets passed or before it gets passed, that there are stipulations and demands for new mental health clinics. And that is something that I would vote for. It's something that has mental health already built into it. So we can do that. We can promote line items within our budget that are going to go directly to serving mental health issues in our ward, in communion with working with our community, with our already based community organizations that are here doing that frontline work.
All right, thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Something I have been doing since day one of my campaign has been speaking about our mental health need. And that's why I have been calling for a new mental health committee into city council, so that we're not having just one-off conversations and then we forget about it and we continue with everything else. By having a committee, we'll have constant communication. We'll be able to bring a better plan into those services. So then, yes, so that we have clinics that are fully funded, but not only that, but they stay open as well. And that's something that we need in the 30th ward. We want to make sure that we have those clinics. We already have one, but we're going to need more across the board, but also to help our youth as well. We need those offices as well to come in. Again, it's about staying fully funded and being able to keep them, and again, holding leaders accountable in city council, and the committee will do so by having, again, a strict committee for that. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will do 2 yes or no questions. Our first question is concerning the Criminal Enterprise Information System, or the new gang database. Do you believe that the Chicago Police Department should move forward with this initiative? We will start with candidate Cruz. Please answer yes or no. And remember, you will have more time to elaborate on any of these questions in your closing statements.
I'll say no for this question. We want to make sure, again, we have other sources, and our youth needs that. That's why I'm part of the Avondale Restorative Justice Community Court, to be able to help those young individuals who have done harm and repair the harm and move on into their lives in the right direction.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
No, I don't think that we should move forward with the gang database. It's already proven extremely problematic, and there's many issues in it. And when you see so many holes and cracks in a structure, that's when you go in to fix it, right? I think that we're getting ready to have a new class of aldermen come in, and they will be able to come up with innovative ways that is not this.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question is, are you in favor of passing the Peace Book Ordinance? The Peace Book is a youth-led initiative that will support the development and implementation of youth-led, non-carceral, and non-policing initiatives for improving community safety and health. Candidates, please answer with a simple yes or no. Candidate Gutierrez?
Yes.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz?
Yes.
Thank you. And for the record, both candidates answered no as to whether they support the new gang database, and answered yes as in favor of passing the Peace Book Ordinance. Now we will shift to our next topic of education. Chicago's 50 alderpersons don't have obvious power over city schools. They don't choose who sits on the education board, pick the school's chief, or have any say over closing schools. They also don't control budgets, contracts, or any personnel issues. As for your question, how can you, as a concerned alderperson, have an impact on the quality and trajectory of schools in your ward? You will have 60 seconds to answer this question, starting with candidate Cruz.
What we do have the power is to organize and build relationships with others, federal and state leaders, to be able to bring those resources to our school. And as part of the local school council, and something we have done in Foreman High School is Foreman has received a grant through the Senator Cristina Passioni, who has endorsed my campaign. And it's about building, again, those relationships to say, this is what we need. Our schools need the resources the same from one side of the town to the other side of the town. We want to make sure that our kids are receiving a quality education, and that's what we need to organize. And we need to be all together with parents from the local school councils, other elected officials, and community members, to be able to organize and, again, fight for our schools and making sure our children are receiving a quality education that we need in Chicago public schools.
Thank you. Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Well, we don't have the power to do what was listed in the question. We do have the power to be advocates. And one way that we can do that is showing up at the CPS board, where aldermen have an unlimited amount of time to be advocates for the community and to speak on any issues that are happening within our community. Also, while it is true in the list that you have stated, but we're about to introduce an elected school board. And that is another way that we can get involved in our communities to make sure that there is transparency and there's responsiveness and that we're fully funding our schools, all schools. Right, should be excellent, and it should not be dependent on where you're living. So we're going to be getting involved in local school councils as they begin to develop, but also just advocating and making sure that we are building a coalition of state representatives, of congressmen, of commissioners, and aldermen who can work together to pass on their influence and bring in those federal dollars into Chicago so that we can create an equilibrium here.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question will also concern the topic of education, and it is, how will you work to strengthen local school councils? And starting in 2024, how will you support and/or check the new elected school board? For this question, you have 30 seconds, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
So I feel like local school councils end up working by themselves the majority of the time. All of the high schools that are in the 30th ward or that feed, right, or have feeders from the 30th ward into their high schools, we need to make sure that our leadership are showing up at those LSC meetings, making sure that we're being supportive and that we're helping them move forward. And if a LSC has an issue and the alderman needs to show up at the CPS board, then that's exactly what I'm going to do is show up. And how do we hold people accountable is having the difficult conversations, having them and making sure that we're all on the same page.
All right, I apologize, candidate, but we are trying to keep our time limits enforced. Candidate Cruz?
Sitting one of the local school council, one is, and as elected, if elected, we want to make sure that we all work together and promote what is the benefit of being part of a local school council, from a community member, from a student, from a parent. We do have a lack of participation. We want to make sure that, again, those who are in a local school council and the school board have interests of CPS, who have the best interest of a Chicago public schools, not other type of interests. And again, this is about our children's education. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will be moving on to the topic of spending money and setting priorities. Alderpersons have controls of the ward's menu money, discretionary funds that can be used on the ward's need. The amount is about $1.5 million. In addition, they seem to have some influence over how TIF monies are spent. TIF stands for tax increment financing, and it is collected from homes and businesses in TIF areas. This money can be used to improve infrastructure or provide other incentives to encourage economic development in the area. Now for your question. How do you plan on spending the ward's menu, money, and TIF funds? Would you be willing to have meetings with community groups and residents of the wards to discuss setting priorities? If so, please describe your proposed process for participatory budgeting. For this question, candidates will have 90 seconds to answer, starting with candidate Cruz.
Yes, it's also something that, since day one, I have been talking about my campaign. It is participatory budgeting, where the community have a say and come to the table to make those decisions. So there is going to be a process that the first phase will be voting for the percentage that we're going to be spending, whether it's repairs, whether it's projects. Once those percentage have been identified, then we'll move on into the projects. The projects will have a description of how long they have been waiting for a new, again, repairs, what is the cost going to take, and then there's going to be a voting process as well. Also, we want to make sure that, again, everybody has a say in, and we'll be hosting meetings throughout. And when it comes to TIF, we do need the economic development across the board. We need our new businesses to come into the ward. We need incentive grants. We need any type of micro grants that come in to be able to not only help those incoming businesses that we need much needed in the community, but also help those that are already current in place. But also work with those not-for-profit organizations that are giving grants. For for example, the Northwest Center, they have, for example, the business incubator where it helps businesses, 3 to 4 businesses to start first, build capital, and then move on, transition into a different own businesses. But again, this is about bringing the community together and making sure that we all have a say in making these decisions.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
So in our first 100 days, in our transition, we're going to have a block by block audit of the ward. And what that's going to do is check for infrastructure, check for safety, check for visibility. What is the state of our roads, our alleys, our sidewalks, the lighting in our communities, right? Abandoned buildings, abandoned storefronts. 40% of this ward is new. It changed in the remap. We cannot go in blind. We need strategies that are driven in data. And in order to have strategies that are driven in data, we need to do investigations. We need to do the research. So that's exactly where we're going to start. We're going to go block by block, let people know when we're on the block so that we can get their input. And after that, we will put together a participatory budget, and not just one. This ward is vast and diverse. I do think we would need 2, one on the east end of the ward and one on the western end of the ward, so that everybody feels that they have a right to where the money is going. And what is this going to do in turn? It's going to help us with voter apathy and mistrust, which is permeating so much across our ward. In order to return the voice back to the people, give them the tools and the education for them so that they can move on forward. Additionally, making sure that we audit the TIF money and the special service area money and funds that we have in the 30th ward. For 2 decades, we have not had transparency. And for 2 decades, we don't know where that TIF money has gone or that SSA money has gone. We need a forensic audit.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will be moving on to a set of questions asked by our audience. First question, how long have you lived in the 30th ward? For this question, you will have 30 seconds, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
I've lived in the 30th ward for 6 years.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
I have been here 23 years, the community that I love so much.
Thank you, candidate. Our next question is regarding charter schools. Do you support charter schools, and will you work to bring those to our ward? You have 30 seconds to answer this question, starting with candidate Cruz.
I support Chicago Public Schools. That's where we need to bring our funding. We want to make sure that, again, our children are receiving education through our Chicago Public Schools. I know my opponent has received about $88,000 from charter schools for anti-public schools.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Well, first of all, charter schools are public schools, and we need to be funding all of our schools, fully funding our schools. One way that we can stop some of the corporate interests that are in charter schools is making sure that, one, we hold the moratorium on charter schools, and equally making sure that we are unionizing all of the teachers. Chicago has done an amazing job. 1/4 of charter schools have been unionized. Most charter schools and public schools have Black and brown students, some of our most vulnerable students in them, and we need to protect all of them and have a seat at that table.
Thank you, candidate. And now for our last audience question in this set of audience questions. What is your plan to fix the many potholes in our neighborhood roads? For this question, you will have 30 seconds to answer, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
Well, I think first of all, we need to find out where they are. And the only way that we're going to do that is going block by block, bringing the ward superintendent, bringing by maybe some of our police officers, starting to build community, right, around law enforcement and community members, and making sure we know where they are. Like I said, 40% of the ward has changed in the remap. We're going to go block to block. We're going to find where the deficits are. We're going to find not only where the holes are literally, but figuratively in our ward in the first 100 days to give something tangible back to our community members.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Something that I will be doing and with my team is we're going to have weekly focuses where we're going to come into the area and make sure we visit our area and we are proactive to be able to see those potholes. Where are they? Submit requests, but more importantly, not only submitting the requests to be fixed, but also to be following up when working with our ward superintendent, but also making sure that are happening. That is about submitting a request. It's about following up and making sure that those services, not only potholes and others, are fulfilled at the end of the day. So, but again, it is going to be important for us to be engaged in the community, and we will.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will be returning to the League's questions, although we will continue to accept audience questions to be asked later on in this forum. Our next topic will touch on the fragmentation of the 30th Ward. The 30th Ward crosses many boundaries, not just police district. It includes portions of Belmont Cragen, Irving Park, Portage Park, and Avondale. Each neighborhood has several community organizations in the ward. Additionally, the 30th Ward also shares business corridors with other wards. How do you plan on achieving your goals given this fragmentation? For this question, you will have 60 seconds to answer, starting with candidate Cruz.
One will be involved in the community, but also working with other elected officials as well. Again, this is not only about the 30th Ward, this is about moving Chicago forward as one. So we'll be working with building with these organizations. So it will be important for us to meet with all the organizations required to see, again, showcase what they're doing so great. What are the things that they need and what I can do to be able to help them with that. But then also build, meet with our businesses, again, identify their needs and moving on with what they need, and also working with the leaders as well. But it's not about meeting with leaders and talking about these conversations. It's about building how we're going to be able to monitor things, how we're going to be able to meet and have constant communication at the end of the day, and all of us meeting together. So it's not a one-off conversation and everybody is at a different pace, we rather say, and all of us to meet at one and talk about our community.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
I think it's pretty clear when you look at the 30th Ward that it's over the past decades, right, has been made up of some neighborhoods, right, that have just been outcasted from other areas. And which is why our messaging has reached and has resonated across the 30th Ward. We need a unifier in the 30th Ward. We have a physical bridge, and now we need someone who's going to come in to bring that together. And I go right back to our 100-day plan. We are not just going to be knocking on your doors during campaign season. Right after this is done, we will be right there to find out what are the unique issues that are happening in different regions of the ward, whether it's hyperdevelopment on the east or horrible flooding in the northern parts, or just, mistrust and voter apathy within some of our Latino areas. We have wonderful business corridors, but if we do not have a forensic audit of the TIF money and of the special service area money that has gone nowhere, or we don't know where it's gone, then we're not going to have a place to start. Let's start with that. Let's audit.
Thank you, candidate. Our next question will be concerning the same issue. Residents do not feel that city services are operating at an acceptable level in the ward. For example, CTA facilities are unclean and unsafe. There are street and sanitation coordination challenges. Rats are overrunning neighborhoods. Residents frequently do not know where to turn. How will you, as alderperson, bring all of this together so residents do not get caught up in the red tape of government? For this question, you will have 45 seconds to answer, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
So we've already started this. We've taken over 200 service requests in the 30th Ward on our campaign. The way that we make sure that residents are being heard is having organization in our office, but making sure that we have a leader who's showing up. Your staff is only going to work as hard as the leader is working. And if that person is not showing up, if that person is not doing the job, then you're not going to feel it across the ward. I have a strong relationship with the current 30th Ward Superintendent, and we've been working together to answer these over 200 calls and requests that have come directly to us. That's how you do it, is building an organization, is going to people's doors, is going block to block and doing the research so that we have strategies, once again, that are driven in data.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
This is part of what I said about building transparency, inclusive in my ward office and being proactive. Something, again, I have always been doing good at my career is being proactive and having like that weekly focus to come out to the community, to hear from residents throughout the ward. And that's why I have been volunteering across these years, having an open door policy, working with a new ward soup as well, working with other departments as well. But again, it's not only about working and making sure, again, we have to be effective to be able to bring those results to the 30th ward. I will be using my experience when it comes to that and understanding that I know the community, I know many residents in the community as well, and making sure, again, we always have a open door policy and we're actively in the community throughout the days.
Thank you, candidate. Our next topic will be on housing. So first, some residents have been heavily impacted by gentrification. Furthermore, with economic development, housing becomes more expensive for longtime residents who might not be able to pay higher rents or higher property taxes. Please share your thoughts on how you will increase affordable housing and home ownership in the ward. For this question, you have 30 seconds, starting with candidate Cruz.
I support affordable housing as part of Chicago's future. We need to stop the displacement. Our youth, not only our youth, but our elders want to stay in our communities. And the only way we're going to be able to accomplish that is being able to offer affordable housing. But like you said, also home ownership through programs, through incentives that we can develop as well can be possible. But again, it's important that we stay in our communities and be rooted in our communities and the communities that we like. And the only one we're going to be able to do that is through affordable housing.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
I've had several conversations within the 30th Ward with residents that are already having issues with developers and misinformation and lack of responsiveness from the alderman, who's Ruth's mentor, right? You know, my opponent has received developer money from the 30th Ward that many residents are pretty upset with. You know, we need to push for affordable housing, establish a community zoning commission, commission an audit and report of existing affordable housing units, support Bring Chicago Home, and working with the assessor's office to enable fair, transparent, and accountable implementation. I think that's how we do it, is showing up.
Thank you, candidate. Now we will go to a series of yes or no questions. Please answer with yes or no, and at the end, you will have 30 seconds to elaborate on any of your answers. First, yes or no question. Do you support the passage of the Bring Chicago Home Ordinance? The Bring Chicago Home Ordinance calls for raising the city's real transfer taxes on sales of properties worth $1 million or more to fund homelessness services in the city, including permanent and temporary affordable housing. Please answer yes or no, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
Yes.
Candidate Cruz?
Yes.
For the record, both candidates said yes. Now on to our next yes or no question. Do you support limiting the control alderpersons have over zoning in their wards? We will start with candidate Cruz.
Yes, it should be a community zoning driven initiative.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Yes, definitely.
For the record, both candidates answered yes. And now we will allow 30 seconds to elaborate on those answers, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
I think the Bring Chicago Home ordinance is going to be extremely urgent in Chicago to make sure that we are helping the unhoused live productive lives with dignity. And the way that we do that within our communities is making sure that we have community-based zoning. I think that the first line of defense needs to be the residents. Once again, I do think since the ward is so vast that two zoning committees would be good, one for each side of the ward.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Bring Chicago Home is something that we have been needing for a very long time. Everybody deserves to have a home where to live and rest. We have to make sure that we take care of homelessness problem. Again, everybody as human beings, we have the right to have that. And that's what Bring Chicago Home does. And that's why a lot of it have been endorsed by a lot of leaders that are advocating for this initiative. And again, we'll be working all of us together.
Thank you, candidates. Our next question will be concerning the Additional Dwelling Units Ordinance, or the ADU Ordinance, which is currently in pilot in portions of the 30th Ward. Do you support the passage of this ordinance? Candidate Cruz, you have 30 seconds to respond.
Yes.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Yes, I do support the passage. I think that this is going to allow for more housing units that we need desperately in our neighborhoods to happen. And I think that it'll be great for folks to be able to use the dwelling units that they have on their property to push that forward and to help deal with the housing crisis that we're facing.
Thank you, candidates. Now we will be moving on to another set of audience questions. First, both of you have backed the bike grid plan. Can you say what you think is important about biking and walking infrastructure in the ward? For this question, you will have 30 seconds to answer, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
Pedestrian safety, particularly, I mean, all over pedestrian safety is important. Where you're going to get a lot of more emphasis on the bike grid, which we've endorsed, is on the eastern end of the ward. We have Milwaukee and Grand Avenue that have seen such upticks in death. We cannot lose any more of our residents to having structures, right, that are not fit for cyclists. So I think, making sure that especially on the east side, but that we're connecting these bike lanes all over the city of Chicago.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Yes, absolutely. We have to protect our bike lanes. We want to make sure that everybody is safe. As I mentioned this before, everybody deserves to come home, be safe. But also we want to make sure that not everybody has a car. So we want to make sure that this is feasible for everybody to be able to ride a bike, but also educate people on bike lanes as well, from those who are driving, for those who are walking, but also the ones who are riding, to make sure that we're all being protected and we're being safe by this initiative. But again, it's about protecting and saving our lives.
Thank you, candidate. Our next audience question is as follows. How do you feel about the City Council's vote this past Thursday, despite the runoff not being over for 14 aldermanic seats? First, candidate Cruz, you will have 30 seconds to respond.
I appreciate the leadership that they have about being independent. I know they're not as a fully, city council that it has been elected, but the idea of making sure that though that is more independent, if it's not the mayor who has the saying and it's the caucus who has the saying, I respect that, for them to take in the initiative now to make sure those rules stay in place for those who come in the future.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Yeah, I support the city council's decision that they've made on their committees. I think that in order for us to have an independent city council, we need to have a strong city council and a weak mayor. That is the formula. It's the formula on how we become policymakers, how we can legislate in city council. And I know that that is going to, remove barriers and help the newer city council members or those who are in the runoffs once they come in. So if it's about independence, then that's the first step. And they took the first step in promoting that independence.
Candidates. And now for our final audience question. Do you support defunding the police? And for this question, you will have 30 seconds to respond, starting with candidate Gutierrez.
I do not support defunding the police. I think that we need to reimagine the police. I think that we need to, one, ensure that we're holding police officers accountable, because in any job that you're in, if you do something bad, then be punished for it. But at the same time, we also need to return the faith back into the new police officers and those that are trying to build community. Police is not going to go anywhere tomorrow. I think that the budget is enough. We can fund the root causes. We can fund social workers. We can fund mental health. We can do everything with that budget.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
No, I do not support defunding the police. We have to support our workforce that we have now. We have to make sure, again, this is what I am supporting treatment, not trauma, to be able to alleviate, and I said this before, some of these responsibilities that the police officers have. Not every call requires a police officer or emergency responder. We can use that, again, that time to alleviate them. And at the end of the day, we all want to live in a safe environment. We want to make sure that we have the resources across the board. So thank you.
Thank you, candidates. And now for a final audience question. This member would like you to take a moment to talk about campaign finance and please shed some light on your funding sources. For this question, you will have 30 seconds to respond, starting with candidate Cruz.
I have a grassroots campaign. A majority of the money has come from my family, from friends, for myself as well, and also other elected officials like Senator Omar Aquino, but also from our unions that have also believed with me, that has been giving me this support for my campaign. They believe in my work, and that's why we have the Northwest Progressive leaders with us and donating for our campaign as well. But again, I decided to invest in myself since day one, not towards the end of the campaign, since day one, because I believe in myself.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Gutierrez.
Our campaign has received small donations, big donations. We've received institutional help. We've received union support. Our top three funders have been Unite Here, the Teamsters, and myself and my family.
Thank you, candidates. Now for our final question before closing statements. We know we've touched on many issues for the ward. However, for this question, we would like you to touch on two other major issues in the ward that we didn't discuss this evening. How do you plan on addressing these issues for the next 4 years? We will begin with candidate Gutierrez, and you will have 60 seconds for this question.
I'm sorry, what was the?
Yeah, so the question, just to reiterate, is what are two major issues that have not been discussed during this forum that you would like to discuss now, and how do you plan on addressing them during your term?
Yeah, definitely number one, the environment. We need to reestablish the Department of Environment and make sure that they are the hub, right, for anything that's happening in the city that concerns making us the greenest city in the United States. The only way that that's going to happen is that we have a department that is overseeing, that is making goals, that it's meeting those goals. So I fully support the Department of Environment so that we can become a city that is recycling. We're not recycling right now. We've had failed pilots, failed programming, and it's because we've gotten rid of the department and no one is focusing on it. If we want to bring all of this back to that equilibrium, well, let's make sure that in all of our schools that we're teaching from the very beginning what exactly recycling and composting it is and how is it going to help us move forward. But also, I would like to commission a written equity plan for our parks, right? So that we can illuminate on racial disparities and promote equal treatment of our parks and of our green spaces.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Something I think that Chicago can be is a world-class city in environment and being a leader to other cities. I've been saying that also throughout my campaign is about bringing the Department of Environment back and be able to bring into accountability into those communities across the board. But also when it comes to being inclusive and being equitable, then making sure that our certain communities are not being harmed. And that's why it's important to make sure that we want more green space across the board. And that's something that not only myself, but resident has been saying is we need more green space in the ward. But also another thing that we need to focus is, and I will touch a little bit on it, is our small businesses. We have to empower our small businesses in our community by offering grants, offering incentives, but also bringing those opportunities. And I have a plan when it comes to bringing the help, when it comes to not paying, is bringing students from universities to be able to propose plans, design websites, create menus, whatever is needed to empower those small businesses.
Thank you, candidates. And now we will be finishing off our forum with closing statements of 90 seconds in reverse order of opening statements. Candidate Gutierrez, you have 90 seconds.
Well, thank you so much to the League of Women Voters. I think that this Zoom call, this forum is exactly what community looks like and should look like, and how we will be running our efforts in the 30th Ward. Today we've outlined how education, public safety, economic development, even transportation should look like in our wards. My office, I want to make my office a hub for city resources, for state resources, for our county resources, and make sure that we're answering hard questions with bold progress. So in our first 100 days, we're going to be hiring a full-time public safety liaison, do a ward-wide infrastructure audit, and also audit the millions of dollars and the hundreds of thousands of dollars in our TIF funds and the SSA, establishing a zoning advisory committee, and also making sure that we have participatory budgets across our ward. I want to be able to host educational town halls and public safety town halls. Let's get out of our house. Let's bring this back to the basics. At the core of our community should be organizing. And if we're going to be organizing, we need strong leadership that's going to make sure and that's going to demand that City Hall shows up for the 30th Ward and that we get the funding and the money that we need to be successful and to be and to have progress on where we are in the 30th Ward.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Cruz.
Thank you for the opportunity to be able to present and give my ideas. But something I want to say is that as an immigrant that came in, the city of Chicago has given me so much. That's why I became a volunteer, to give back to my community, and been there since many years to be able to, again, bring the community together, bring resources to the community, and never thought that because I wanted to volunteer and give back to the community will have a negative impact when it comes to the current sitting alderman, Era Rivoras. He's a current sitting alderman, Rivoras. I reached out to him because I wanted to give back to the community as he was the one leading the community. And when it comes to about my mentor, I want to say that my mentor is Delia Ramirez, who has been guiding me through the campaign since day one with advices and what to do in the community, because that's what we're doing. We're building a coalition of people that leaders that are putting people first, that are working for the community, and it's going to be in the best interest of the community, not personal interest, not other interests, but it really working for the community. And that's why when it comes to my plan, it's not only having a plan, it's about executing the plan and be able to have those resources. I wanted to have transferable skills for what I have been doing into the community. And that's why we need community participation. And that's why we're going to bring the community to the table to be able to make those decisions with myself and others. And I want to say thank you so much for your time. And again, hope I can earn your support. Coming April 4, punch number 52.
All right, thank you to both candidates, and thank you to our audience as well as our timekeeper for being here this afternoon. I will now be passing it off to Catherine Mardikes for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Inanna. Thank you for being such an amazing moderator. And thank you, Melanie Nordstrom, for keeping us all on schedule. And a special thanks to our candidates. It was just wonderful that you came out today to make sure that voters know where you stand on the issues. We really appreciate it. Normally at this time in a non-virtual meeting, we would ask the audience to come forward and chat with you, ask questions. I know there were some people who had some personal, more direct questions, but we were not able to do that, obviously. But instead, in lieu of that, I am going to be putting links to both of their campaign sites into the chat right now. So let's say that in lieu of that audience interaction, you can go to the site and read through all of their stands that are on their sites. Again, thank you, everybody. And don't forget, you've got a couple days to vote early, and then you'll want to vote at on April 4th. And know that your early voting site is also a voting center. It will be open all day. That's especially important for people who have accessibility issues, because those voting sites are fully accessible. Thank you. And